to truly grasp the magnitude of what is unfolding before our eyes today, we must first transport our minds back to a time when the world seemed, to the believers, to have ended completely. We must journey back to the year 1258, to the city of Baghdad, the heart of the Islamic world, the center of civilization, the round city that had stood for centuries as a beacon of knowledge, light, and power. For 500 years, the Abbasid Caliphate had been the superpower of the earth. While Europe was wallowing in its dark ages, Muslims were mapping the stars, pioneering medicine, and preserving the heritage of humanity. Baghdad was not just a capital, it was the manifestation of Allah's favor upon this Ummah, a city so magnificent that poets sang its praises, and travelers from distant lands would weep upon it, entering its gates out of sheer awe at its splendor. But then the horizon darkened. From the east came a storm like no other, a tidal wave of flesh and steel that the world had never witnessed, the Mongols. They were not an army, they were a force of nature. They swept across the Muslim lands with a speed and brutality that defied logic. City after city fell, Bukhara, Samarkand, Ray, each one witnessing slaughter that defied the imagination. But the Muslims believed, perhaps naively, that Baghdad would hold. They believed the House of Wisdom would stand, the Caliph was protected, and that the sanctity of the city would halt the invaders. They were wrong. When the Mongol forces, under the command of Hulagu Khan, finally surrounded Baghdad, the siege was brief but decisive, and when the gates were breached, what followed was not just a conquest, it was an erasure. The Tigris River, they say, ran black with the ink of the countless books thrown into its waters. The House of Wisdom, that glorious library containing the accumulated knowledge of centuries, the works of Aristotle, the medical treatises, the astronomical charts, was burned to the ground. Imagine the burning of the Library of Alexandria multiplied 100 times over. But it wasn't just books that were destroyed, it was people. Men, women, and children were put to the sword. The streets were filled with such carnage that the horses of the Mongols could not pass without treading on the bodies of the dead. The psychological impact on the Muslim Ummah cannot be overstated. It was an eclipse of the soul. Imagine waking up the day after the fall of Baghdad. The Caliph, the shadow of Allah on earth, had been rolled up in a rug and trampled to death. A humiliation so profound it still stings the heart centuries later. The seat of the Khilafah was gone. The greatest scholars were dead. The libraries were ash. For the average Muslim living in that era, it must have felt like the end of Islam itself. They must have looked at the sky and asked, "Where is Allah? How could he allow his house to be desecrated? How could he allow his people to be humiliated by a pagan force that knows no mercy and fears no God?" The silence that fell over the Muslim world was deafening. It was a time of absolute despair. There was no superpower left to appeal to. There was no army on the horizon coming to save the day. The Mongols appeared to be the Gog and Magog of their time, an unstoppable evil that had swallowed the light of the world. Every institution the Muslims trusted in, the political leadership, the military might, the academic prestige, had crumbled in a matter of weeks. This was not just a military defeat, it was a civilizational collapse, a moment where the very existence of the Ummah hung by a thread, leaving the believers in a valley of darkness so deep that they could not see the sun rising again. And it is in this exact atmosphere of total devastation and hopelessness that we find the first link to our reality today. If we lift our gaze from the pages of those dusty history books and direct it toward the bleeding lands of the Levant today, we cannot help but feel a shiver of recognition. That river of black ink in the Tigris has been replaced by the rivers of red blood and gray dust flowing through the streets of Gaza. What we are witnessing today is not merely a conflict. It is a seismic event, a modern-day catastrophe that mirrors the desolation of Baghdad in terrifyingly vivid ways. When we look at the footage coming out of that tiny, besieged strip of land, we are not just looking at news headlines. We are looking at the raw, exposed nerves of the Ummah being tested with fire and steel. Think about the sheer asymmetry of what is happening. In the time of the Mongols, the Muslims had swords and arrows. Today, the people of Gaza have almost nothing but their bare hands and their unwavering faith against a military superpower equipped with the most advanced weaponry the world has ever known. We see buildings that once housed entire families, multi-story structures that were homes to memories, laughter, and life, instantly reduced to rubble in the blink of an eye. The technology of destruction has evolved, but the result on the ground remains hauntingly the same. Mountains of debris where civilizations once stood, and the wailing of mothers piercing skies, cries that echo the laments of Baghdad 8 centuries ago. And let us be honest about the reality of this trial. It is difficult to watch, it shakes us to our core. We see images of children pulled from the wreckage, dust, covered and dazed, their eyes asking questions that we have no answers for. We see hospitals, places that are supposed to be sanctuaries of healing, overwhelmed, targeted, and left without power. The blockade turns the entire area into an open-air prison where there is no escape, nowhere to run, and no safe haven. This feeling of entrapment, of being cornered by a force seemingly indifferent to the rules of war or the cries of humanity, this is exactly what the Muslims of that era must have felt. They too were trapped, watching the sky darken, realizing that the armies of the world were silent or complicit in their destruction. But notice the specific nature of this trial. It is not just a test of patience, it is a test of of faith itself. When the bombs fall relentlessly, when the infrastructure is annihilated, and when the basic necessities of life are cut off, the easy option would be to despair. The logical option, according to worldly standards, would be to abandon hope, to say that it is over, that the loss is too great, and that the odds are too insurmountable. Yet, what do we see in Gaza? We see a resilience that defies human psychology. We see people who have lost their worldly possessions standing on the ruins of their homes and declaring Allahu Akbar. We see a level of steadfastness that cannot be manufactured by political ideology or nationalism. It can only come from a heart that is connected to its creator. This connection is the vital link between the past and the present. Just as the believers in Baghdad faced an enemy that wanted to erase their identity, the people of Gaza today are facing a force that seeks to break their will. The enemy calculates in tons of explosives and numbers of casualties, but they fail to account for the spiritual calculus of the believer. They do not understand that you can bomb the building, but you cannot bomb the foundation of faith that lies within the chest. We look at Gaza, and we should feel pain, undoubtedly, but we should also feel a profound sense of awe. We are witnessing a living Quran, a manifestation of the verse where Allah describes the believers as those who, when struck by disaster, say, "Indeed, to Allah we belong, and indeed to Him we will return." The despair that the Mongols inflicted was designed to make the Muslims question their faith, to ask, "Where is the help of Allah?" And today, as we watch the screens, that same whisper might try to enter our hearts. We look at the scale of the destruction and the silence of the international community, and we feel small. But this feeling of smallness is exactly where Allah wants us to be, because it is when we realize that we have no one but Him that the true nature of this trial is revealed. Gaza is not just a tragedy, it is a mirror. It is forcing the entire Ummah to look at itself and ask, who are we? What do we stand for? And most importantly, who do we rely upon? So as we stand witness to this modern-day massacre, this storm that has ravaged the houses of Gaza, let us not get lost in the agony of the moment alone. Let us instead recognize that this is the very furnace where true believers are purified. It is the same fire that burned Baghdad and it requires from us the same response that history demands from those who know their Lord. So, where does this leave us? We have journeyed through the ashes of Baghdad, witnessing the total eclipse of Islamic civilization, and we have looked directly into the eyes of our brothers and sisters in Gaza, seeing a reflection of that same anguish and devastation. If we were to rely solely on political analysis, military strategy, or the logic of this worldly material life, the conclusion would be bleak. If the story were written by the powerful, the victors, and the oppressors, the screen would fade to black right now, and the credits would roll on the defeat of the believers. But we are not people who read the script written by men. We are people who follow the decree of the one who created men. And this is where we must anchor our hearts, no matter how stormy the seas become. We anchor them in the unchanging truth, the promise of Allah. We must understand that the situation is never truly hopeless for the believer, because hope, in the Islamic tradition, is not wishful thinking, it is a theological certainty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made a covenant that he will never allow the light of Islam to be extinguished, no matter how hard the winds of tyranny blow. We are told in the Quran, they want to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths, but Allah will perfect his light, although the disbelievers dislike it. This is not just a verse recitation. It is a historical law that has proven itself true time and time again. When the Mongols were drowning the Tigris with ink and blood, they truly believed they had extinguished that light. They believed they had erased the name of Allah from the earth, but they failed to understand that the light of Allah is not in the books, nor is it in the buildings, it is in the hearts of the believers. And as long as there is even one heart beating on this earth that says La ilaha illallah, the light remains lit, and the promise remains alive. But we must be clear about the nature of this promise. Victory in the way of Allah does not always look like the victory Hollywood depicts. It does not always mean an immediate, overnight transformation, where the oppressed suddenly possess the weapons of the oppressors. The promise of Allah is often intertwined with the concept of of lessons and purification. Sometimes the victory is that the believers refuse to bow down. Sometimes the victory is that in the face of starvation, the people of Gaza are breaking their fast and standing for Taraweeh, praying under the open sky while the drones hover above. That is a victory that the enemies cannot comprehend. The Prophet, peace be upon him, told us that a time would come when the believers would be small in number and weak in power, yet they would be given help by Allah. He was asked how this help would come. He replied, by the rain being sent down, by victory being granted, or by earthquakes swallowing the enemy. The mechanics are up to Allah. The outcome is guaranteed. We have to stop looking at the events of Gaza through the lens of the 24-hour news cycle. Our sight is limited. We see the rubble, the blood, and the tears. We see the timeline of days and weeks. But Allah sees the timeline of eternity. He is Al-Hayy, the ever-living, and Al-Qayyum, the sustainer. He does not rush as we rush. He allowed the Mongols to rampage for years. He allowed Pharaoh to rule for decades, oppressing Musa and his people. But the delay in the punishment was not a denial of the promise. It was a setup for the ultimate sign of Allah's power. When victory finally came, it came in a way that shattered the arrogance of the oppressors forever. The destruction of Baghdad felt like the end, but it was actually a painful reset that prepared the Ummah for new chapters of history, including the rise of the Ottomans and the spread of Islam into new continents. The destruction we see today is devastating, yes, but it is not the end of the story. Therefore, the core of our faith right now must be a firm, unshakable belief that Allah has not abandoned Gaza. The people of Gaza have not been abandoned by the Lord of the Kaaba. If they are being tested with fire, it is only because they have been chosen for a rank of honor that few can bear. The promise of Allah is asterisk, verily, with hardship comes ease. Asterisk, it does not say after hardship comes ease. It says asterisk with asterisk it. The ease is intertwined within the struggle itself, in the tranquility of the hearts, the steadfastness of the faith, and the exposure of the truth to the world. The world is waking up because of Gaza. The Ummah is waking up because of Gaza. This too is part of the plan. So do not let the whispers of Shaitan, the despair of the media, or the silence of world leaders make you doubt the word of your Lord. The same Allah who destroyed the army of Abraha with birds of clay, the same Allah who parted the sea for Musa, and the same Allah who turned the tides of Badr with a few angels, is fully capable of changing the situation of our brothers and sisters in the blink of an eye. The plans of the enemies are fragile, built on sand and arrogance, but the promise of Allah is a mountain that does not shake. Now we arrive at the final, most breathtaking chapter of this parallel, and it is here that the believer's heart must truly find rest. We have seen the destruction of Baghdad, and we see the destruction in Gaza. We have felt the despair of the past and the pain of the present, but if we close the book there, we have ignored the ending that only Allah writes. The story of the Mongols did not end in the ashes of Baghdad. It did not end with the humiliation of the Muslims. In fact, the most profound twist in this narrative was yet to come. And this is the divine twist that we must engrave upon our minds as we look toward the future of Palestine. After the Mongols had decimated the Muslim world, after they had killed the scholars and burned the libraries, they settled in the lands they had conquered. They became the new rulers, the new authorities. They had absolutely no incentive to convert to Islam. From a worldly perspective, Islam was the religion of the defeated, the religion of the people they had subjugated and crushed. Why would the victors adopt the faith of the vanquished? It made no logical sense, yet within a generation something miraculous happened. The sheer resilience, the simplicity, and the undeniable truth of the faith of the remaining Muslims began to penetrate the hearts of the conquerors. The Mongol rulers, the grandsons of those who destroyed Baghdad, began entering the fold of Islam one by one. Consider the sheer magnitude of this event. The very force that sought to eradicate Islam became the vehicle through which Islam spread to new frontiers. The descendants of Hulagu Khan, the very man who killed the Caliph, eventually became the defenders of the faith. The Ilkhanate, established in what is now Iran and Iraq, eventually converted to Islam, not by the sword, but by the witnessing of the character of the believers they lived amongst. They went from destroyers of the Ummah to leaders within it. This is the Son of Allah. He often allows the enemy to reach the peak of their arrogance, thinking they have won, only to pull the rug from beneath them and turn their plans against them. He uses the very stones they throw to build the foundation of his own house. As the Quran tells us, asterisk, they plot and plan, and Allah too plans, but the best of planners is Allah. Asterisk, and so, when we look at Gaza today, we must ask ourselves, what is the divine twist for our time? We see the devastation, yes. But what is happening beneath the surface? The enemies of Islam gather today with the same intent as the Mongols: to humiliate, to destroy, and to erase the spirit of the people. But look at what has happened instead. Before this tragedy, how many of us truly cried for Palestine? How many of us knew the names of its streets or the history of its people? The Ummah was asleep, distracted by the dunya. But the bombs that were meant to break the backs of the Palestinians actually broke the backs of our indifference. Gaza has become a clarion call that has awakened the conscience of the entire world. The very images that were meant to terrify us have instead ignited a flame of faith and solidarity that stretches from the east to the west. Furthermore, look at the children of Gaza. The enemy wants to raise a generation that is traumatized, broken, and secular. They think that by killing the scholars and destroying the schools, they can stop the transmission of the deen. But they are mistaken. They are creating a generation of children who do not know fear because they have already seen the worst of life. They are raising children whose connection to Allah is forged in the fires of tribulation. A child who stands amidst the rubble, thanking Allah despite having lost everything, possesses a faith stronger than 1,000,000 sermons. These are the future leaders of the Ummah. These are the ones who will carry the banner of Islam long after the current aggressors have faded into the dustbin of history. The blood of the martyrs is never spilled in vain. It acts as a seed. Just as the blood of the early Muslims in the battles of Badr and Uhud watered the tree that gave shade to the world, the blood of Gaza today is watering the roots of a revival that we may not fully see in our lifetimes, but which is inevitable. The narrative has shifted. The world is waking up to the injustice. The hypocrisy of the powerful is being exposed daily, and the beauty of a man, the surrender to Allah, is being displayed on the largest stage in human history. The enemy thought they were bombing a people into submission. Instead, they are broadcasting a dawah invitation to the entire world. So, do not be deceived by the smoke and the debris. The promise of Allah is not just about survival, it is about transformation. He will take this darkness and turn it into light. He will take this defeat and turn it into a victory that will be recounted in the history books of the future. Just as we recount the conversion of the Mongols today, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Gaza today is the heart of the Ummah, bleeding so that the rest of the body may live. And from this blood, a new era of Islam will undoubtedly rise.